What's going on, guys? Welcome to my driver ratings, my driver tier list for the 2023 Belgian Grand Prix. So another sprint weekend, and I think an okay race, an okay weekend as a whole. It definitely wasn't a banger race, but I think it was a little bit better than some people are giving it credit for. Yes, there wasn't really a battle for the lead in the end, but I think there was a decent amount of battling, you know, elsewhere in the pack. So yeah, I don't think it was a terrible race. It definitely wasn't the best of the season, but I think it definitely wasn't the worst. So yeah, let's get on with the ratings though. So starting off with Alexander Albon, as we always do. Actually, let me just quickly put Ricardo to where he should be. Where would that become? Russell. So before Russell, I think. Yeah, that's where he sits. So yeah, Alexander Albon finished in P14 in the end. I think he got a little bit screwed over by the strategy from Williams. So yeah, not great in that regard, but that wasn't his fault. It was all strategy. And he was running up in P10 and doing a pretty good job for most of the race. So do I give him an A? Because really, it wasn't his fault, really at all. That it was all because of the strategy, really, that he fell back. He's A. I don't know if A is a bit too generous considering he didn't score points. And he was 14, but it was because of the strategy. So I don't think there's anything more he could have done. So yeah, I'm gonna give him an A. Screw it. That's what I'm gonna do. Fernando Alonso finished in P5. Actually, a pretty good race from Alonso in the end. Did not have a good sprint. Spun out and DNF'd in the sprint, but wasn't looking to score points anyway. And then in the race, he managed to pull out a P5, which was much better than I think that car was really capable of doing. So yeah, I think a pretty good result from Alonso. I'm going to give him an A, to be honest. I don't think he could have done any more in that car. Yes, he didn't have a good sprint, but this rating is mainly for the main race. I do factor in the sprint and qualifying a little bit, but it's mainly for the main race, and he did a really good job in the main race. He absolutely maximized what he could have done. And in the sprint, maybe he pushed it a bit too hard, but to be fair, he wasn't going to be scoring points anyway, so I can't really weigh that on him too much. So yeah, I think an A for Alonso. Very good result for P5. Valtteri Bottas ended up finishing P12, was right behind, well, Gasly, and then Tsunoda was a little bit further ahead for P10. But Bottas actually had a pretty decent weekend. I'm going to give Bottas a B. I think it was a pretty decent weekend from him in that Alfa Romeo. The Alfa Romeo just doesn't have the pace. It seemed to have good pace and quality at Budapest, Hungary last time out, but here, completely different track, didn't have the pace. So to finish P12 and not too far off the points, only like 3 seconds off the points, I think it's a pretty decent job. Of course, De Vries isn't here anymore. We will get rid of him eventually, probably for next time. Pierre Gasly, now, didn't have a great main race, finished P11 behind Tsunoda, but P3 in the sprint, so really good in the sprint. And although, yes, this is mainly for the race, when a driver does, do really well in the sprint and gets good points, I am going to factor that in a decent amount here. And qualifying didn't go that well for him in the main race, but I'm going to still give Pierre Gasly a B, because I think, he's done a pretty good job here. I'd almost give it an A, to be honest, if we were factoring more in the sprint. But because we are factoring mostly the race, it's going to be a B for me. I think he pretty much did what he had to do in that car. Lewis Hamilton ended up P4, was actually catching Leclerc towards the end of the race, but ultimately just didn't really have the pace in that Mercedes this time around. Do I give him is it an A though? I mean, it's P4. He was catching, he wasn't a whole long way ahead of Alonso though. So he did get fastest lap in the end though. He did get the fastest lap. So I guess he was, that's probably why he was falling off Alonso. Falling back from Alonso because he came in for another pit stop. Perhaps. I will be honest, I missed the last 4 laps of the race, although I have kind of watched the highlights back. I'm going to give Hamilton an A. I don't think the car was there performance-wise this weekend. I think he did about as much as he could have done. So, yeah, I think an A is fair enough. Nico Hülkenberg, a pretty terrible weekend. Was P20 in both qualifying sessions, finished P18, last of the runners in the race. I mean, the Haas didn't have pace, but yeah. And then I don't know how he did in the sprint, but I don't think he did very well there either. Although qualifying was pretty much both times. First time was kind of a mechanical problem he had, and then the team didn't get him out in time. And then it was a similar sort of thing in the other quali session as well. And the Haas doesn't have the pace, but he has finished 10 seconds or so behind Magnussen here. I think I'm going to have to give Hulkenberg a D. It might be a little bit harsh, but to be last in pretty much everything, every session or weekend, every, proper session, is not great for Hulkenberg. So I think a D. It's got to be for him. I do apologise. Charles Leclerc ended up finishing P3 in the race. Did not have a very good sprint though. I think if it was just the race, of course, started on pole position because of Max Verstappen's penalty and beat Perez in qualifying as well. But I think, he had a fairly mediocre sprint. So, I think I've got to give him an A for that. If it wasn't for the sprint, it would be an S, but the sprint does let it down a little bit here because I do factor them in a little bit, but it's still an A from Leclerc. In the race, he did everything he was able to do. Didn't have the pace of the Red Bull, still only finished 10 seconds behind Perez, so yeah, I think that's everything he could have done. Kevin Magnussen, yeah, I think it's just a C for Magnussen. He seemed to have the better over Hulkenberg this weekend. Yes, Hulkenberg had the issues with qualifying, but Magnussen got it to work. He got into Q2 in, I think, the main qualifying, or was it sprint qualifying? One of the two, but then got a penalty for impeding. But yeah, I think a C. It's kind of just average pass grade. Lando Norris finished P7, honestly was off the pace of Oscar this whole weekend, I'd say. Picked up damage in quali, that's why he didn't get a particularly good quali result. In the sprint, just didn't quite have the pace of Piastri. And then in the race, well, McLaren set the car up for wet running and it was a mostly dry race, so he was just getting overtaken left, right and centre. But to come back for P7 in the end, with that little bit of wet running they had, he was absolutely carving through the field. I think it's a B for Norris. Definitely not one of his better weekends for sure, but yeah, the car was not set up right for the race. It just really wasn't for those conditions. But yeah, when it did start raining and he started, in Sector 2, when he was getting all those great moves around the outside of cars, that was some awesome stuff to see. But down the straights, he was an absolute sitting duck the whole race. Esteban Ocon, I think I've got to give Ocon... Ooh, do I give him a B? I mean, he finished 8th. He finished ahead of Gasly in the race. He finished fair way behind Gasly for the sprint, though. Gasly was P3. I don't even think Ocon was in the points. That was also partly down to the whole thing with the sprint, how, kind of every team, one driver pitted one lap early, and that they got the advantage. So I guess Gasly kind of helped out because of that. So I think it's a B. That might be a bit generous for Ocon, but I think it's a B. Personally, I think Gasly had the better weekend, but yeah, Ocon did beat him in the race, so I think I've just got to give him the same grade. Sergio Perez, of course, finished P2, got the lead pretty much right at the start on the way down the main straight down to, is it Les Combes? Is that the name of the corner? Or La Source? Oh, I know that those are two corner names. I'm not sure if they're both corner names at Spa. I've probably got one of those wrong there. He was going down the main overtaking spot and got past Leclerc on the first lap. But in the end, still finished 22 seconds behind Verstappen, who started in P6 when Perez started P2. And Verstappen, I think, overtook Perez on lap 17 and then pulled that 22-second gap. It's a good result, a 1-2 for Red Bull. He's managed to get second, but I think I've still got to give him a B. He's finally had a good quali, and he's actually finished second in the race. But to be 22 seconds behind your teammate that only overtook you almost halfway into the race is not good. There was a bigger gap to Perez, between Verstappen and Perez than there was between Perez and Leclerc, by double the time. So, yeah, I think it's a B from Perez. I mean, Max is on another level, but Checo needs to be closer. He really does. Oscar Piastri, a very difficult one, of course, was P2 in the sprint, had the pace on Lando all weekend, I would say, but unfortunately didn't get past turn 1 in the race because of contact with Sainz. I'm under the belief that I lean mostly towards a racing incident on that, especially being lap one, turn one. But if I had to put blame on anyone, I would put it on Sainz. I saw Sainz's tweet about, racing incident, but Oscar shouldn't have done this. I don't really agree with that with Sainz. I think Sainz, he locked up going into turn one and then kind of had to turn away from Hamilton on his outside. And Piastri was alongside him. Piastri was pretty fairly alongside him. So I'm going to give Piastri, and it may sound a bit stupid because he didn't even get past lap one, but I'm going to give Piastri an A because his pace was amazing this weekend. He had the up on Lando, and the crash I don't think was really, maybe slightly his fault, but I don't think it was anywhere near as much his fault as it was Sainz's fault. An A for Piastri. I think, considering he's a rookie and what he's doing in that car and beating Lando genuinely this weekend, I think if he finished the race, I think he would have beaten Lando. Is amazing. So yeah, I think Piastri's doing great things. Daniel Ricciardo, the other Aussie in the field, did not have a very good weekend. Finished P16 for Ricciardo. Had a good sprint though. I'm going to give him a C. I'm going to kind of go down the middle because his sprint was good. His race was not so good, mainly because he screwed up in quali and didn't get his lap. He got his lap time deleted for kind of straight lining over Rouge and Radion, and then just couldn't make positions in the race. So I think it's a C for Ricciardo. Also got fairly convincingly beaten by his teammate in the race, so that's a big thing as well, which we'll get to. George Russell, another interesting weekend for Russell. Not really on the pace of Hamilton, not as good of a quali. Russell's been a bit strange lately. He's been a bit topsy-turvy, especially on Saturdays, which is weird considering he used to be Mr. Saturday. I'm still going to give him a B though, because he's come through, he's finished P6 still, and he's not miles behind, so I think it was decent. It was a decent performance from Russell, but at the moment, I can definitely say that Hamilton has the edge over Russell at the moment. Carlos Sainz, decent sprint from what I remember, but I think he finished like P4 or 5 or something. But yeah, the race, good qualifying, but, well, not great qualifying because his teammate was quite a way ahead of him. But yeah, I mostly put the blame on Sainz for that incident. I'm not going to, because it was lap one, turn one, and he did have Hamilton on the outside, I'm not going to go all the way to an E. I am going to give him a D though, because I do think that was mostly his fault, and I'm a little bit frustrated in the way that he's acted afterwards on Twitter, with that post. I think that's a bit, I don't know, it's a bit rude to Piastri to be like, he's only a rookie, he's only learning. It's like, I don't know, and from what I've heard, most other people think that you were the one mostly to blame, mate. So, not the weekend that Sainz would have wanted. Logan Sargent finished P17, but not a mile behind Albon. I think he did that extra pit stop. I'm going to give Sargent a B because I think he had pretty decent pace this weekend. I think he had one spin or crash in one of the qualifying sessions, potentially. But other than that, I think he's been pretty good this weekend. He was fairly close on pace with Albon, and despite finishing P17, second to last of the finishers, not great, but he wasn't a mile behind Albon. I think it was a decent weekend for Sargent. Lance Stroll finished P9, fair way off Alonso again, but I think all in all decent. The car was not great this weekend, and he pulled off a great move on it must have been Lando Norris towards the start of the race. Might have even been lap 1. No, it was a bit more into the race, but I'm going to give Lance Stroll a B. I think he did fine. The car I don't think was that great for this weekend, and he still managed to score 2 points, so good on you, Stroll. Yuki Tsunoda, I think Tsunoda had a great weekend. P10 in the end. Only just behind Stroll as well, within a second by the looks of it, from what I'm looking at here. I'd almost give him an S, but I think I'm going to give him an A. I'm not going to quite give him an S. He didn't have a very good sprint, but it was a very good weekend from Tsunoda this time around. To score points in that AlphaTauri, good on you, Yuki. Really, really good stuff. Want to see more of it. Max Verstappen, it's an S. He didn't get pole, but that's only because he had a grid penalty. He was 8/10ths quicker in qualifying, and then he was only like 1,000ths quicker in or 100th quicker in in sprint quali, but yeah, I mean, he dominated. Let's move on to the final driver, Zhou Guanyu, who finished in P13. Yeah, I think it's just a C for Guanyu. Didn't really see a whole lot of him. Yeah, not really much to say there. So there we have it. That is my 2023 Belgian Grand Prix driver tier list. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments down below. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.